Welcome to the Botany Bistro, where we're serving up bite-sized botany for you to munch on as you savor the science of plants. My name is Mary, and I'll be your botanist today. Our menu includes an exploration of plants in the Asteraceae family. The Asteraceae family is one of the largest plant families with about 32,000 species. Commonly called the daisy family, these plants are characterized by their flowers. This plant family is not just about daisies, though. We're talking sunflowers, zinnias, dahlias, marigolds. The list really does go on and on. A major common characteristic of plants in the Asteraceae family is their unique flowers. These flowers are actually compounded, which means that they have hundreds of different flowers that make up a single flower head. For example, when I look at these beautiful rudbeckias, I am looking at this nice ray of petals that line the outer edge of this darker center. But really, I'm looking at hundreds of different flowers right now. These inner flowers are called disc flowers, and those are the flowers that have the male and female reproductive parts. The outer petals are actually made by a flower called a ray flower, and those tend to be sterile. The purpose of the ray flowers is to attract pollinators to the inner disc flowers that will produce the seeds after they're fertilized. This means that every time we're looking at the head of a sunflower, a daisy, marigold, we're actually looking at a whole community of flowers that are all working together. Plants in the Asteraceae are everywhere in southwestern Ohio this time of year. On a recent trip driving through the state, my gaze was often drawn to the beautiful gardens just growing along the roadside in the ditches. Now, I was safe and I kept my eyes on the road, but when I could afford a glance over, I was noticing Asteraceae flowers everywhere. We see Joe pieweed, chicory, yarrow, thistle, and even the common dandelion is part of this plant family. Dandelions were one of the first plants that caught my attention as a child. I loved running through the lawn and looking for little wish flowers. That was the term that I gave the dandelion after it had bloomed and it was starting to set its seeds. You could pluck up that puffball of seeds, make a wish, and blow your heart out. My family was not one to discourage dandelions from growing in our lawn, so thankfully I had a lot of them to choose from. And it really was a fun way to see the whole life cycle of a plant. The dandelions come up early in the spring and are an important nectar and pollen source for some of our pollinators. The leaves have these very interesting jagged ridges on the margins, which actually is how the dandelion got its name. It was named for lion's teeth. Dandelions were brought over to the United States by Europeans and planted purposefully in their gardens because the greens are so nutritious. You can also use the petals to make dandelion wine, which I've actually never tried. So if you've done that, send us your recipe over to the bistro and we'll give it a try. Opening up a dandelion and breaking that stem, you see this milky sap, which is actually latex. The plant produces this to try to deter herbivores from eating it. But make sure that you are not allergic to latex before you really start dissecting and getting into dandelions. Dandelions also exhibit a common trait in the Asteraceae family, which is called heliotropism. Heliotropism means that the plant tracks the movement of the sun across the sky throughout the day. When you are looking at a young plant, such as a dandelion or a young sunflower that has not bloomed yet, take some time to notice which direction it is facing. As the plant matures, it will exhibit less heliotropism, and once the flower opens, it tends to stay oriented towards the east so that it can take advantage of the warmest part of the morning and attract pollinators. Heliotropism in plants can sometimes be hard to observe in a short amount of time. So give yourself a few hours, have a nice picnic, or take a picture of one of your young, unopened sunflowers or dandelions in the morning, and then again in the afternoon, and compare to see if your plant is exhibiting heliotropism. Another beautiful plant that's going to be blooming in Ohio this time of year is going to be Joe pieweed. Joe pie weed ranges in size but can be very tall, upwards of 10 feet, and then other species can top out at about 3 or 4 feet. So if you're considering adding Joe pie weed to your landscape, make sure you do your research and pick a size that works for you. Where did this name Joe pie come from? Legend has it that Joe Pye was actually a very powerful individual in the Mohican community. Many Native Americans used Joe Pye weed for anti-inflammatory relief and also for colds and other stomach illnesses. So the association of this medicinal plant with a very powerful leader in the community makes sense and has endured today. Soon these blooms will open and they will be an absolute magnet for butterflies who sip on the nectar as they prepare to lay their eggs for the next generation. Another common Asteraceae you'll see popping up along the roadsides is called chicory. This plant has blue blooms, occasionally white or pink as well. But these blue blooms are actually very unique. Blue is a color that's rarely found in nature because plants just don't have true blue pigments. So in order to produce a blue, you have to mutate your anthocyanins and also regulate your pH. And so it's very rare to see these blue blooms. Chicory has been used as a coffee substitute and additive for many generations. And while I haven't tried it, I would be game. So it sounds like we might have a future bistro with a little dandelion wine and maybe some chicory coffee. The blooms on chicory only last for one day, and they actually close around midday when the sun is out. After they close, they don't reopen and they wilt. So these flowers are one day only. Chicory plants can be short-lived perennials that live between 3 to 7 years. So if you have these in your landscape, maybe do a little experimentation. You won't be the only one enjoying those blooms. Leafcutter bees and other types of insects also like to feed on them and enjoy the nectar. So be sure to look out for pollinators on the way. Let's talk about another roadside Asteraceae, goldenrod. There are lots of different varieties of goldenrod, some more well behaved than others. But if you find yourself with a patch of goldenrod, you might want to mark it. I do have to say that this is a plant that I often accidentally take down just because it really doesn't look like much until it starts to bloom, which tends to be fairly late in the season. Goldenrod can be tall, or there are shorter varieties that you can incorporate into your landscape. But these goldenrods actually provide a very important late summer, early fall nectar source for a lot of our pollinators. If you find a patch of goldenrod with nothing else growing, that might be due to the fact that goldenrods are alleliopathic, as well as are some other Asteraceae plant members. This means that they exude chemicals from their roots and other plant parts that inhibit other things from germinating. So you could have a pretty solid patch of goldenrod and not a lot else in that area as it becomes established. Something you can do with your goldenrod, though, is to make teas and tonics. You can also use it for natural dyes. It produces a really nice chartreuse color, which I find to be beautiful when paired with black walnuts and pokeberries. While there are some plants in the Asteraceae that I would like to stay far away from my garden beds, such as thistle, I do invite several other species into my garden for their amazing benefits, marigolds being one of them. We like to plant marigolds around our edible garden beds so that they deter aphids, mosquitoes, and other bugs from munching on our plants. We've made a lovely calendula salve from the calendula flowers growing at the Pendleton Children's Garden, and I still have some yarrow salve left over from last season. One of my favorite trail mixes includes sunflower kernels, and we often use sunflower oil in our homemade dressings to sprinkle over romaine and a few other things from the garden. Finally, at the end of the day, I don't mind snuggling up with a cup of warm chamomile tea, and all of these plants are in the Asteraceae. I have to admit that when we bought our home 13 years ago, I was not as in love with plants in the Asteraceae as I might seem today. These beautiful black-eyed Susans that surround different areas of my yard were definitely something I tried to eradicate for several seasons. However, I would say Black-Eyed Susan 1, Mary Dudley, nothing. But now I really appreciate their beautiful blooms. They're such a wonderful welcome sign to the end of summer and as we start to transition back to the school year. And they really are abuzz with amazing pollinators. I can't identify all the pollinators that I see visiting these little flowers, but they are numerous. And so I've found a spot for them to stay in our landscape. Hopefully you'll be able to go out and enjoy some plants in the Asteraceae family the next time you take a walk or a hike. And I'm so grateful that you joined us on the bistro. Stay tuned for more Bistro to Go.